program on negotiation that you heard about, Harvard, MIT, Tufts, has been around now going on 30 years. It's the primary place where research and scholarship happens on the study of negotiation and dispute resolution. There's a bookshelf now of over 100 books in all different fields that have come out from the program on negotiation. And what I've tried to do is take all the 100 books and reduce everything important into one side of one page. And that's the part that you have. So the really, really valuable knowledge that you're going to need for the upcoming exercise you're going to be part of is on this page, and I'm going to talk you through that page before we start. But hearing about ideas and methods in negotiation isn't going to make you a better negotiator. You have to try it. So we're going to create two different negotiating situations this afternoon, and you'll be paired off with someone and do a negotiation, and then all the pairs will scatter around the space, and we'll look at the different results of the 10 pairs of people doing the same negotiation separately and see what's similar and what's different. And anyone who thinks they're all going to be the same because the instructions are all the same doesn't understand that personality and strategy has a lot to do with the outcome. So we're going to see differences across the pairs, and we'll talk about those. And then you'll have a second chance to negotiate. Maybe take something you learned from the first time and have a chance to see if trying things in a different way gets you a better result. That's the idea. Compare the results, and then wrap up by trying to reinforce the points on this one page in light of what happened in the two negotiations, and be done at 4 o'clock. That's the objective, all of that. The negotiations you're going to be doing were designed for the training that I do for the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta, when they bring back all of the people from all over the world that work for the CDC in all different countries, particularly on the PEPFAR program, negotiating for HIV/AIDS action. Because all of the scientists and medical scientists involved come home after a relatively short period of time quite discouraged, because the people in those countries don't do what they tell them. They come and they say, here's how you should use this $3 billion that the United States is giving away to all these selected almost 24 countries. And the people in the country say, thank you very much, we know what we should use it for. And the CDC says, but look, we are a results-oriented organization. And we know what's been tried and what's not, and what works and what doesn't. And things you are proposing aren't going to work, and the things we're telling you, that's what you want to do. And the countries say, well, we're very glad you're giving us the money, but we're not going to do what you're saying. And they come, and then they take a negotiation course, which they really should have had before they went. And they really should have had as part of their training. And so what we're trying to do is shoehorn in a little negotiation training, so when all of you are in those kinds of positions, you will already have some principles to draw on. Now, it turns out that in many negotiations, you've got as much problem with the person behind you, who allegedly is on the same side as you do with the person on the other side of the table, who's ostensibly the one who you're trying to convince to do something. We call this, in the negotiation world, the inside-outside problem. That for every outside negotiation you're supposed to do, you've got an inside problem. Getting your mandate clear. Knowing that you have the authority to commit your side. Having the support of your people when it comes time to implement what you negotiated on their behalf. So, the inside-outside problem, big deal issue. So because of that, I've put two negotiation exercises together. The first takes place in an African country, which I made up, and and in this African country, which is described in the piece of paper that you picked up, there's a negotiation going on between the CDC person, who is the person in charge of getting particular programs to deal with HIV/AIDS underway in this country, and the AID person, who is the political operative for the United States, trying to make sure that the CDC understands that U.S. interests in this country have to be taken into account because AID has a long-term relationship with the leadership of this country and has its own agenda. And so there has to be a meeting of the minds between the AID person and the CDC person before they meet with the Minister of Health in the country. So the first negotiation you're going to do is supposedly with somebody on your side. Now, you will not be surprised to discover that the two of you don't have exactly the same view of what's important, because you represent two organizations with different missions, different priorities, and you represent two people with their own ego and agendas. And to help you play these roles properly, you will receive confidential instructions. These are based on dozens of interviews that my staff and I did with people in these real situations. And I want the negotiation to be realistic. The only way to do that is to talk to people who really have to do these negotiations and understand all the things that went on or that are going on, and to compress those into the confidential instructions that you will have. So you don't get to figure out how would a CDC doctor in this country do stuff. You have confidential instructions telling you what your priorities are and why, and what arguments you want to make in behalf of things. And if you want to keep your job, you have to pay attention to that. You can't just improvise and do what you personally feel would be nice. Okay? So you have general instructions about this country and this situation, one page. You have second page of general instructions about this first negotiation. And then you will receive, you don't have them yet, confidential instructions. And your confidential instructions, when you get them, will have a little number in the upper right-hand corner. So you'll get the green confidential instructions with the number 2. And you will need to find the counterpart person who has the orange instructions, who has a 2, and that'll be a partner. Okay, so I'll take you through all that when we get to it, but I'm going to start with this one page, laminated so it won't get lost and crushed so quickly, because that's 100 books worth. Keep it for a while, it'll be useful to you. And I'm talking through it, and stop me at any point when anything's unclear. I have to remember that you haven't had any, you have, so I'm working on the assumption that you haven't had negotiation courses before, so I'm trying to include all the appropriate language as I go. But if I take too much for granted, stop me and ask me questions, it's fine. And then we'll go on to the first negotiation, look at the results, second negotiation, look at the results, tie it all back to this framework. Okay? And everything I'm going to say to you about this framework is also written in this very nice handout from the Consensus Building Institute called the Mutual Gains Approach to Negotiation. Okay, so you don't have to take this all your notes, just listen. The notes are written for you already. Okay. All right. Any effort to get someone to do what you want, when you want, the way you want is a negotiation, whether you're used to thinking of it that way or not. Any effort to get someone to do what you want, when you want, the way you want, you're in negotiation. Now you may think because someone works for you, that when you tell them to do what you want, there's no negotiation. I promise you there is. You may think there's not, you may act like there's not, there's always a negotiation going on, if only the look on the person's face, the speed with which they don't do what you ask, the grudging way in which they do what you want, and don't do it the way they know you want them to do it because they don't think it's the right thing for you to ask them. You're in a negotiation. So you might as well have some ideas about how to negotiate. When you're trying to get someone at the same level as you, who's supposed to be working with you to do what you want, when you want, the way you want, you're in a negotiation. They have their way. They have their priorities. They have other demands. They don't agree with you. They don't like you. You still have to get stuff worked out. You're in a negotiation. And when you work for someone, in the same way that someone working for you is negotiating with you when they don't like the instructions you're giving them, when you're working for someone, you're in a negotiation. When they say, do you want to do this? You say, no. They say, well, I do it anyway. Or, do it this way. You say, well, that's not the way I usually do it. No, do it this way. How do you get it worked out? That's a negotiation. Okay? So I'm talking about a very prevalent kind of interaction. I'm not talking about a highly specialized thing where the product is a contract signed with lawyers present. That's a kind of negotiation, but that's trivial compared to all the other negotiations you're doing all the time. So having an idea in your head about how to do negotiation is going to be useful, right? And agreeing with your partner about which restaurant you're going to go to tonight, that's a negotiation. Okay? You might as well have an idea about how to negotiate. It will help you not just in your work life, but in your personal life. And you're very lucky because the approach to negotiation that the Program on Negotiation and the Consensus Building Institute teach is an approach that says, if you get what you want and destroy the relationship in the process, this is not good. So we have developed an idea about negotiation which puts a premium on ending up with a better relationship even after the negotiation. And you can't say that about a lot of negotiations, right? You go into the marketplace, right, and you're buying and selling stuff, and you may never be there again, they may never see you again. Relationships are not what you're putting a premium on. Price is what you're putting a premium on. But if you try to negotiate everything like you're in the bazaar, you're going to have crummy relationships as a byproduct of it. The only way to end up with good relationships is to negotiate in a right way that pays attention to maintaining the relationships. And in a work context where you're going to be in a place for a long time, or your people are going to be in that place for a long time, merely getting someone to do what you want in the short term and having them wish nothing but revenge after that, this is not a good thing. So the good news is the model of negotiation that I'm going to tell you about, the mutual gains approach to negotiation, is an approach to negotiation at all levels that puts a premium on ending up not only getting what you want, but also having an improved relationship. If you look at the card, it's divided into 4 columns. The 4 columns are meant to capture the 4 stages of any negotiation. They are what you do before you sit down with the other person, preparation. What you do at the beginning of interaction with the other person, where there's an opportunity to create value. The third is, what do you do before you get up, shake hands, or walk away with nothing? What do you do before you confirm what you've agreed to or don't agree to? We call that distribute value. And the 4th stage is the one that people very often pay no attention to, which is a big, big shortcoming. Which is between the time someone says they agree to something and the time they actually do it, you are still in negotiation. Oh, hello, you know that thing I promised you? I can't do it. What do you mean you can't do it? You promised I can't do it. No, but we were counting on it. I can't do it. Well, what am I going to have to do to get you to do it? Negotiate. So the fourth stage is that period between when people say they're going to do something and when commitments are fulfilled. 4 stages of every negotiation: preparation, value creation, value distribution, and follow-through. And you have to be attentive to all 4 because they interact in really interesting ways. So anybody who says, oh, I'll figure out what to do once I get there and I'm sitting there with the other side, right? They already screwed it up. You're not going to get a good result. I don't care how fast on their feet they are. They haven't worked out stuff with their own people. So when they get to the point in the negotiation when they're about to agree to something, they say, wait, I have to call home. Or worse, they think their people will approve it. So they say, we have a deal. Then they call home and say, I got good news, I got a deal. They say, we don't like it. Now what do you do? Preparation is absolutely crucial. And I'm going to take you through the 5 or 6 things you really should try to sear into your brain about preparing for negotiation. It's not about time, it's not about elaborate analysis, it's just a few simple ideas which I will take you through. The mutual gains approach to negotiation says that a good outcome is one that's pretty good for the other side and great for you. That's why the relationship's enhanced. You came up with something that was pretty good for them. Not, I'm taking it all too bad for you. I'm bigger than you are. That's not going to improve the relationship. You might actually get away with it in the short term, but it's not going to improve the relationship. So what's a way to negotiate that produces a result that's pretty good for the other side and great for you? Preparation is the key. Of these 4 phases, first is the most important. Preparation is the key to getting a good result in all kinds of negotiation. And the mutual gains approach to negotiation says during preparation, you can't just be thinking about how the situation looks from your vantage point. That thorough negotiation means putting yourself in the other person's shoes before you ever sit down with them. And if you can't or won't do that, you're never going to get a good result. So, I'm getting ready to negotiate. I say to myself, what is my mandate? Because I usually represent someone or some group or some organization or somebody who's going to judge what I do, evaluate it, have to approve it, stakeholders, stockholders, bosses, back tables. It's rarely just you. So what's my mandate? If you don't know, you're not going to be able to start. And once you're clear that I'm supposed to be trying to achieve this on behalf of our group or organization, and that I have authority to either decide or I don't. I can commit or I can't. You don't want to guess that in the middle. You need to know that. That's part of preparation, is clarifying what's your mandate. Then you have to be really clear about what we call your interests. Your interests. And there's a really important distinction that has emerged in all the research in the program of negotiation between positions and interests. My position is, if you don't give me 200, I'm out of here. That's a position. And if you hear me say something like that, you should ask me why. What's my interest? What interest am I trying to achieve when I take that position? Because you want to search for a lower cost way to you of meeting my interest. They have nothing to do with what I've demanded as my position. But if all you hear ever are my positions, then you'll tell me your positions, and then we will be in a battle to see who's giving up, or who's giving in, or who's compromising. But if I can hear your interests and find an ingenious way, low cost to me, of meeting them in exchange for your meeting mine, that's when we're going to get a pretty good outcome for you and a great outcome for me. So I need to know my interests during preparation. Interests are the kinds of things important to you in rank order. The kinds of things important to you in any given situation. So in the 2 negotiations you're going to do this afternoon, in your confidential instructions, it will tell you what your interests are. And the order of things is very, very important because everything's not equally important. So if you can get the most important things to you in exchange for having to give up something that's not very important, that's going to be a great outcome. But if you don't know what your interests are, you're not ready to negotiate. And then we say, you need to be aware of the interests on the other side. You have to think about them during preparation. And I know what's going to happen. You're going to get your assignment for this case, and you're going to be paired up with somebody, and you're going to start to sit down, and you're going to try to gather all the information you can about what you want is so important, by what you have to have, what you want, and why your group, department, ministry, whatever, is the most important, and what are all the things we can throw at the other side that will cause them to do what we want. And you won't spend any time saying, if I were on their side sitting down right now, what would be at the top of their list as most important interests? Why? Because we want to find a low-cost way of helping them get things that are important to them in exchange for them giving me what's most important to me and my most important interests. So you better know your interests and have thought about theirs. And I've put together a good list of questions to confirm whether your estimate of what their interests are is accurate. They're not going to just come and blab all that. They're very likely to lay out positions. And you have to ask a lot of why questions. Why is that so? Why do you take that stand? Why is that so important to you? Because why is how you get an interest, underlying positions. Then, program negotiation, one of the ways we do research is we plead with groups going into big deal negotiations. Could we please be a fly on the wall? We won't say anything, we promise. We keep it confidential, we promise. We just need to gather the data. So we watch people prepare, and we keep our lips sealed. And then we watch them go into the negotiation, and we struggle to keep our mouths shut. And then we see what happens, and we write it up. And then we talk to them each afterwards about what they think happened, and we write it up. And we do hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of those kinds of observations. And after a while, after 25 years, we saw a lot of patterns over and over and over again. If you watch people prepare who haven't had any instruction, they spend all their time thinking about what their opening demand is going to be. That's their big strategic concern in their preparatory meeting. How outrageous can our opening demand be to prove to them we're tough, to prove to them they can't push us around, to prove to them that we're serious? We really only need 100. Let's demand 1,000 and see what happens. Of course, the other side is outraged. There's no way they can give you 1,000 and have any left for them. So their first response to your 1,000 is no. And then you go, okay, 999. That's as low as we're going. And then people will prepare a script. What's your opening? What's your fallback? It's not that stuff. That's what amateurs do. It's amazing to me that this is still going around. Because it's not like we haven't written 100 books in 30 languages. You'd think by now somebody would have gotten a hint that starting out with outrageous demands is the way to begin. And then see who gives in how much, how quickly, and then hope that you snag at the bottom of what's at least okay, and don't slip below that into no agreement land. Instead, what you need to do is focus on estimating what no agreement means to you. And in negotiation language, you'll see the reference to the acronym. We talk about BATNA, B-A-T-N-A. Best, in this case, doesn't mean your fondest dreams. Best means what you're most likely to end up with if you don't get agreement. So if I'm going out that door to do the most important negotiation in my life, I'm not focused on what am I going to demand at the opening and what I'm going to fall back to. I'm focused on what I'm going to walk away from the deal at. What's my walk away? And my walk away should be based on my estimate of what am I left with if there's no agreement. I don't want to take less than that in the negotiation. Now, maybe there's a way before I go out there and negotiate, I could improve my next best option. Right? Because I work in negotiation, my colleagues come to me all the time with lots of surprising questions. I want to buy this house. I never studied negotiation. We really, really, really want this house. How should we negotiate? And I say, you're not going to like what I'm going to say. And they go, oh my God, you don't think we're going to get the house? I said, I don't know anything about it. That's not what I'm going to say. What I'm going to tell you is, find the second house you like. They go, oh my God, you don't think we're going to get the house? I said, I'm trying to help you get the house at a reasonable price. Go find the second house and fall in love with that. And then when you go to make your offer on the house that you want, the first one, and they say, we would like twice as much as you're offering. We decided that our list price isn't the real price. We have other bids from other people. What's the most you'll pay? Which is what's going on. You'll say, look, the list price was what we were interested in. And you know, in your head and in your heart, you have a next best house that you will take at that price. And you're not going to be suckered into offering a lot more money than you have because you fell in love with the first house. Your BATNA in the first house negotiation is what you're most likely to end up with if there's no agreement. And that becomes the push-off point in the negotiation. Now, not everything that you're negotiating can be put into this form where you can go through your own efforts and get a next best option all worked out, have it in your pocket, and use it as the point of comparison. Okay? But you can try to estimate what your next best option is if there's no agreement. If I can't close this deal, I don't have this job anymore, they're going to fire me. My organization's going to be boxed out. No, we'll never be able to work here again. Gee, these aren't very good options. I guess they'll take whatever they offer. Well, that means you have a lousy BATNA. You have no BATNA. You have to take whatever the other side offers. That is, you have no power in the negotiation. The single greatest source of power in negotiation is a good walk away. You don't give me what I want, goodbye. Because I can get a pretty good option over there. So, hey, I don't have to lord it over you, but I'm not going to do anything that I don't like. Single greatest source of power is a good walk away. Bad walk away, no power. Good walk away, lots of power. Where does that walk away come from? Self-help efforts to analyze, understand, generate more options. That's all part of preparation. I haven't sat down with the other side. I should be doing this. I can't do this after I'm talking to the other side. That's why I'm saying preparation is so important. Your mandate, your interest, your sense of their interest, your BATNA, try to improve it, your sense of their BATNA. Now you're almost ready to sit down with them. A lot of work. Proposals that are pretty good for them and great for you. What are the proposals based on? Meeting their interests and your interests. Beating their BATNA by as little as you have to, because if what you offer is better than their BATNA, they'll take it. What are some proposals that you are ready to put on the table that are pretty good for them? Beats their BATNA, meets what you would think are their most important interests. Meets all of your interests and is way above your BATNA. That's the kind of proposal you want to be ready to put forward. You can't improvise those on the spur of the moment because often you need to get your people to agree that you're empowered to put those proposals forward. You have to work out the details of those things. That's all part of preparation. That's the first step in negotiation. Most important step. So, when you start your real exercise, I don't mean the afternoon exercise, I mean the exercise that you really hear about, don't just focus on how the problem looks from your side. It's so easy to get caught up in just that one perspective. Our side needs, our side wants. What can we say to demonstrate to the others that what we say is really it? If I had 1 hour to prepare for a negotiation, I'd split it in two halves. And half I look at the problem from my standpoint, and half I look at the problem from the other side's standpoint. If I had a day, I'd split it in half. If I had a year, I'd split it in half. It's as important to understand how the problem looks to the other side, their back and their interests, as best you can understand it. Proposal's pretty good for them and good for you, as it is to focus on things from your side. There's nothing harder to train people to do than what I just said. I mean, I've been teaching at Harvard Law School for decades. And every class I say, every semester, no, I'm going to tell you, yes, you're being trained as an advocate. Yes, you're going to work for somebody, you're their lawyer, but you better learn how to think empathetically about how the people on the other side of the table are thinking about the problem, or you can't represent the interests of your client effectively. They go, and then I watch them negotiate, and they spend not a minute of their preparation time doing anything other than laying out all the fancy arguments for why what they want is right. It's just something about people getting lost in the moment, or in the dynamic of the nervousness of having to prepare to interact with someone who you know wants something different from you. I better be ready. I better really focus on my argument. I better get myself armed. It's not the way. Okay. Take a few minutes on the second stage. So, by the way, when we start the exercise in a few minutes here, the first exercise, I'm going to give you a half hour to prepare. Even though you can read the thing in 5 minutes. I'm going to give you a half hour to prepare before you ever sit down with the person on the other side. You want to use that time, read a book, do what you want, but the idea is you'll have a half hour to prepare. And you can sit with one or more people with the same assignment you have. If you want to. If you're better sitting in a corner by yourself, do that. If you want to talk to your alter ego, how often do we get a chance to do that? As part of your preparation, grab somebody with the same color piece of paper as you have. They're going to be negotiating on their own with their partner. But during that half hour, if you want help preparing, fine. But I'm not going to shortchange that half hour, because I'm saying to you that what you do during that half hour has more to do with what the outcome is going to be than anything else. Okay? Then, you sit down with the other side. And you're now at the second column. Now, again, in real life, it is astonishing if you get to watch as many negotiations as I do. How and why people immediately get into a groove that assumes that every negotiation is a zero-sum situation. Well, if I want something, they must want it. If I get it, they can't have it. If they get it, I can't have it. I'd rather I got it. And then everything follows from that. There's a presumption that gains to one have to be mirrored by losses to the other. Now, it turns out, in real life, that's not true. In fact, it turns out most of the time, it's not true. Give you an example outside of the context we're going to mostly be talking about. I work on water negotiations all over the world. Nile, Indus, Amazon, Mekong, pick a river. Multiple countries, riparians, they're called, along the river. And they're all going, there's a river, it has water. If they get the water, I don't get it. I think I need to build a dam. I'm upstream here, I'm going to build a Okay, I'm going to keep the water so that no matter what happens, I will have some. And the others say, they're acting to hoard the water. Well, watch me. I'm going to capture my own version of the water. And what we do is we have a battle on the assumption that water is a scarce resource and whatever one has, the others can't have. So one grabs the water, hoards it, builds an impoundment system of some sort, uses the water for urban uses, and then it goes into the sewer system, and then the gray water goes out wherever. And the other one hoards what share of the water they can have and uses the water for agriculture, and it goes into the groundwater, and it is whatever contaminated by whatever fertilizers and pesticides used. But each got the water they want. Now, under other circumstances, if you could bring them together and say, what's the way to make sure we both have as much water for what we need as possible? They'd say, well, gee, if you use the water for an urban use first, and we've used the right technology and the right system for managing it, we can take that same water and use it for agricultural purposes. We just doubled the water. Water is not a scarce resource. Water is a flexible resource. But it's only flexible relative to the relationship between the parties. You can't introduce technology. You can't do something unless you can count on, trust, the others will do their part. That has to all be negotiated. If you assume you're in a zero-sum situation, by you are. And then you just battle who gets what. But if you could create value by framing the problem as one in which the goal is to meet as much of the interests on both sides, you can do that. Okay? So, back from water to the general case. Creating value. How do we think about strategically in any negotiation? You're sitting there with the other side. How can we not fall into a zero-sum trap? How can we move ourselves into a value-creating situation? Well, if I will listen and understand your interests, and then you will listen and understand my interests, we can then try to brainstorm ways of meeting both interests. But nobody's going to brainstorm anything unless and until they can be sure that nothing is committed until people are ready to commit. If every word out of my mouth during brainstorming can be something you hold me to, believe me, I'm not going to improvise on my feet. So everybody's been in some kind of brainstorming group effort. We're sitting around a table, and if you have people in a group who never work together in brainstorming, they're very likely when someone says, okay, we're brainstorming, I'm going to write up, well, here's one way to solve the problem, and the person in the back of the table who's never done this before says, that's stupid. Nobody else wants to propose anything else. Nobody wants to be told that their ideas are stupid. So we just threw a wet blanket over brainstorming, which is why experienced brainstorming people know that you have a ground rule, which is we suspend criticism until we have much of a list of ideas for solving our mutual problem as we can get. And then, after we've generated all those ideas, let's talk about them together, talk about their pros and cons in a way that isn't aimed at telling other people how bad their ideas are. And we know that in any kind, I mean, there's a whole literature on group problem solving and brainstorming. We know, suspend criticism. But boy, getting people to do it. If they think they're in a zero-sum situation, they're not going to do it. If they think they're in a zero-sum situation, they're looking for every opportunity they can get to discredit what the other side is proposing. Because, hey, if I don't, they'll win. If they win, I don't get what I want. So we're trying in a value-creating context in the second phase, to options for mutual gain, my list, suspend criticism, invent without committing. Now you won't and can't do that unless you have an agreed upon ground rule that says for the next hour, week, month, we're going to have inventing. No commitments apply until we're ready to commit. We're going to suspend criticism. We're going to try to invent options for mutual gain. So let's start out by laying out our interests and then generating possible ideas for meeting both sets of interests. Okay? And after you've done that, the way to create value is through trades and packaging. If I have something that you want very much, and I don't care that much about it, and you have something that I dearly covet, and it's not that important to you, if we trade those two things, that is the creation of value. That's not compromise. That's the creation of value. We're exploiting differences to create value through trades, through packaging. Okay? Now, I can say that till I'm blue in the face. And when I watch experienced people in the heat of the negotiation, they make a terrible, terrible mistake, even after I told them 100 times not to do it, which is there's 4 items on their agenda. That's been worked out before they got there at the meeting. And they're so desperate to make progress in the negotiation, and they try to close on issue 1 before they go on to issue 2. So issue 1 comes up, this is, I want it, you can't have it, I want it, no, yes, no, yes. Oh, shucks, let's go on to issue 2. On issue 2, I want this. Well, maybe we could work something out. All right, here's the deal on issue 2. Now let's go on to issue 3. We'll go back to 1 later. Terrible mistake. Now I know somewhere along the way in your life, if you're all smart, educated people, someone told you that the way to handle complicated problems is to break them into pieces. Take the easiest pieces, solve those first, build momentum, build on that, and you'll solve the complicated problem. It is the worst possible advice for negotiation that anyone could ever come up with. Because there's no trades possible, which means you can't create value. Now, you have to talk about the issues one at a time, but you have to insist on a ground rule that says nothing's agreed to until everything's agreed to. So now it's talk. Nothing's agreed to until everything's agreed to. Now let's talk. So issue 1 comes up. Well, you know what? Issue 1's not that important to me, but I'll talk about it with you. And if I know what I'm going to get on issue 4, my big deal issue, I might be more inclined to give you more on 1. I need to know whether you'll support what I want on 4. But if you're just going to make me reach a deal on 1, it's going to be important to me. So I have to find a way to talk about 1, 2, 3, 4 and get a package and then say, well, can we improve upon this package for both of us? Now, that takes restraint. It takes artistry. It takes patience. Most of which most negotiators don't have any of. And so they get results on one thing that they like. They judge their success because they got more than the other person. If I took 100 valuable coins and put them in a bowl right over here, and Louis and I are going to divide them up, and you guys will go away, and you come back in 10 minutes, and we're smiling and we're shaking hands, and you say, Louis, how many did you get out of those 100 valuable coins? He says 25. And he's smiling and he's happy, and you're looking at him funny. And you say to me, Larry, how many did you get? And I go, 25. And now you're really convinced you would never want either of us on your team. But we're happy and we're shaking hands and we reached a deal. How could that be? Oh, he was told by his people, don't get less than 25 and get back here by 3 o'clock. And I was told by my people, don't get less than he gets. And don't take all day about it. We have other things you can work on. So we can both go home and get a raise. But it's not a very good agreement from the standpoint point of maximizing the creation of value. But so often people have a goal, and so often as compared to the other side, or as compared to some mandate somebody gave them without thinking much about what's possible in terms of meeting interests on both sides, and so we don't create much value. In the negotiation world, we have all kinds of graphical ways of talking about this, some from game theory, some from economics, but basically, if this is what Luis gets from 0 up to infinity, and this is what I get from 0 to infinity, and this is my bat, this is his bat, now he won't take anything worse than that, because he might as well just leave and go negotiate with the next person, because he's got a very high degree of confidence he can get at least 25 there. I got my figure here, and that points to the minimum possible deal. And it could be good enough, we could both go home, and we would not have created much value, but we would have an acceptable deal. But what you really want to be doing in most negotiations is moving as far to the northeast as you can of that minimum acceptable deal, because everything above this is better for Lewis, and everything above this is better for me. So I would prefer to be somewhere in this northeasterly direction. And again, analytically, that's 100 coins for Lewis and none for me. That's 100 for me and none for him. And this curve is 99, 198, 296, 396, 4. And anyone who's studied economics know that's the Pareto efficiency curve, which means you haven't wasted anything. That curve would be all the deals that used up all the 100 coins. This would be an acceptable deal. We ought to be negotiating in a way that moves us out toward that curve. Now the problem in real life is nobody tells you how many coins there are. Just say, have a negotiation. Good luck. Well, how can I be moving in this direction in the way I negotiate when I don't know where the edge is? Well, the key is in this second column to play the game of what if. Listen, I'll bet you're more interested in this and this and that. In other words, I think you're interested in this. My interests are this and this, and I have no problem telling you that. I have a hunch that if I gave you more of this and this, you might give me more of that and that. What's about that whole package? I'll give you more of this if you give me more of that, and let's put it this way. What do you say? It's a little better for you, Lewis. Not better for me. I said, well, maybe, but you know, if you give me much more of this, I'll give you that. Let's split it this way. Now, we're not committing. We're inventing without committing, but we're what-ifing our way toward an unknown frontier. If I told you that 100 coins, that's one kind of negotiation, but most negotiations, you don't know what the value is that can be created. And I'm promising you it won't be created unless you do the things listed in that second column. You can skip that column and just go right to distributing whatever value is visible in some simple-minded way right from the beginning, and then just say, oh, I got more than he did, or I got my minimum. So if you skip that second column, you'll always be dividing a small pie. You might get a bigger piece than they get, but just think of how much more you could have had if you made the pie larger before you divvied it up. Two more things and I'll stop. The third column is what most people think of as negotiation. Oh, it's a contest. I don't like it. Wish everybody would just be nice. Well, it's not how it is. It's not what's going to happen. You will be negotiating. But if you can find a way of negotiating that always first makes the pie larger, there's a chance everybody will get more than what the minimum is that they need, which makes the whole experience much more congenial. But at some point, you're going to divide up the value that you created, right? If we're here, we can go here. That's a good deal. From Lewis's standpoint, I'm no worse off. He's way better off. We can go here. I like it. He's no worse worse off. Why shouldn't he just give me a lot more? He's still he's ready to live with this. Why just not give me 10 times more and just live with what you've said okay to already? There's no right location between there and there. Better to be out here and not waste value, but there's no right location. There's no analysis that's going to con somebody into accepting way less than what they were hoping to get. So the question is, when you go to the third column and you're distributing value, how do you do it in a way that maintains or enhances relationships and doesn't ruin them? Because I promise you that a zero-sum negotiation, which you try to hook one over on the other side so you can get more than they do, is not going to leave you with a great relationship. Well, it turns out, and again, I'm summarizing a dozen books. Anybody wants to email me, I'm happy to give you one bibliography. I'm having all my time to read stuff. But should you be interested, I'm happy to give you the empirical work that goes behind any of the things that I'm saying on this one side. Okay. If you're in a battle across the table, this is your team, the X's. That's their team, the Y's. This is not sports. You're sitting across the table. These folks are not your problem. Your problem is their second table. The people that they report to. And their problem, not you. It's your second table. All these people who you prepared with and who will judge you when you go back. Okay? So I can say to you, I've said to you 5 times already, I should get 60% of the pie and you should get 40, and you're not listening. And you say, I hear what you said. I can say it back to you. To prove to you I heard. I'm not doing it. I said, you're not listening. I should get 60, and you should get 40. And they say, no, it should be the other way around. I said, why aren't you listening to me? Okay, you can go back and forth like that the whole time. At some point, you have to realize that they have to go back and get approval, literally or figuratively, for the deal that you're suggesting, right? So you're telling them, go back to your second table. This is the first table, this is the second table, these are back tables. Go back to your second table and tell them, I got the better of you. I got 60, you got 40. Go sell it to them. What's going to happen? If I'm sitting here, I have to make a case to this person that they can go back and sell to their second table because I can't go to their second table. What's going to convince their second table to do what I want? An argument that any neutral observer would agree is a credible claim. Any neutral observer would agree. So I'm sitting here, X, I'm talking to Y and saying, look, Y, I should get 60% because I brought way more to the table in this deal than you did. Or there's 100 agreements just like this that have been done all over the place. And in all those deals, the one who brought the most to the table gets 60% and the partner gets 40%. Or we had a deal last time in which you got 60% when you brought this. Now I'm bringing it, I should get 60 this time. What am I doing? I'm appealing to a criterion or a principle that I imagine any neutral observer would say, that sounds right. Because I need something that they can carry back and present to their second table with their head held up. And they have to say to the second table, look, we got 40%, they got 60, because any neutral observer looking at this would say that that's the appropriate split because of this, and this. If I don't give reasons that their second table can buy, why should they agree? So when you look down that third column, you see the reference to objective standards or objective criteria. You know, as scientists, don't misunderstand. I'm not arguing there's a correct split. Objective doesn't mean correct. It means explicit and justified. construct a case for why what you want is what they should go along with. It isn't just, here's why I like it. It has to be, here's why your second table should agree to this. And the burden is on you to construct those arguments. And then, in terms of relationships, if this person has a way to go back and sell it, it's a lot easier the next time you work together or you negotiate. You say, you can count on the same standard we had last time. And what would a neutral observer agree was an appropriate distribution of the value we created? That's the precedent you want to set. That's what's going to maintain relationships. Okay? All right, so I'm going to stop. I just wanted to highlight a few of those concepts at this stage before you start this first negotiation question.
I have a question. My question is that we're talking about negotiations between two sides. So how would it be different when we have multiple actors sitting in one table? Because then you won't have on the face a dichotomous version of outcomes, agreement, reality. You have different versions of agreement. And you can like create friends and create enemies by taking a single step. So like are there any extra things to pay attention to?
So you not only want me to cover 14 weeks in 1 hour, you want me to cover not 101 but 201, which is multi-party negotiation, at the same time. And I can just make a couple of statements about it. I really can't get into it in any depth. When you negotiate with two people, one on each side, that's one kind of negotiation. When you add parties on one or both sides, the world changes. Negotiation changes. Will cause coalitions emerge. And on top of everything I said, you have to have both offensive and defensive coalitional strategies. And working that meta level of coalitional, who do I talk to first on their side? Do I meet with them privately before the group? What promises do I make? How firm are those promises? Who do I want to have in my winning coalition? Who might be in a blocking coalition? It's up. I did a 4-volume series for SAGE on multi-party negotiations, 1,700 pages. It's a very elaborate next order discussion. I work on global treaties, climate change treaty. Let's get 197 countries to come on down and negotiate a 70-page draft. You can't all talk at the same time. Who talks with them? Who talks with them privately? Who makes what commitments to them? How do you build coalitions? That's the key difference. When there's more than one party, I don't mean people representing the same party, but more than one party on one or both sides, is the emergence of coalitions. And the management of the conversation becomes brutal, which is why we introduce, again, no time today, but why we introduce what we call the N+1 player. Add up all the parties, that's N. The manager of the process, that's the +1 player. Neutral party, acceptable to all the parties, to manage the conversation, because it's too hard. When there's more than two parties, it's too hard. That's what mediators do, that's what facilitators do. They manage the conversation when there's more than two parties, because the coalitional dynamics outweigh everything else. So it's a perfectly legitimate question. I just don't have time to spend more time on it. But if you want to consult in the library, because you don't want to buy those 4 books, they're way too expensive, but there's a copy in all of our libraries for multi-party negotiation. Any other questions on any of the concepts? Because you're going to have to use them in the next 5 minutes. All right, so we need to hand out the confidential instructions. And are we matching people up with their partners?